Good afternoon. Welcome to Beyond Tools, 3 Rules for Leading Design and Development Teams. My name is Adam Jones. I'm a group director here at VML Y&R in Kansas City, where I support our design and development teams with mobile strategy and best practices.
And I'm John Resman. I'm a design manager here at Atlassian, located in sunny Sydney, Australia. And I focus on the ecosystem platform team where we actually connect all of our Atlassian products via second and third party applications. And Ab and I, we go way back. I think it's 5-6 years now. I'm originally from Kansas City. And so I used to work at VML Y&R. And I can remember back in the day, Adam and I worked on different teams at VML, but we were always bumping into each other in the same meetings. And that's mainly because they were pulling us in to try to unblock the team, to try to get them to move forward so that the project could be successful.
Yeah, and in fact, I recall some of those conversations that we had across lunches and in the hallways really stemmed from the fact that some individuals saw that their role stopped and started with the tool that they were using. The good news is we've worked on that. We've solved that. And that's what we want to share with you today.
But first, we want to ask a quick question, if we can get a show of digital hands today, about how many of you are responsible for shipping great experiences. And if you're sitting there raising your hand or nodding your head, then fantastic. You're at the right spot because you're actually in charge of engineering, product, and design now. And that's going to be the main theme of our talk today, is to really show that it's everybody that really makes a great experience at the end of the day. So today we're going to walk you through 3 rules for leading design and development teams. And let's kick it off with the first rule. And that is separate your processes from your tools. So processes and tools are always evolving, right? I feel like I wake up every day and I read about a new process coming out, or I read about a hot new tool. I can remember, Adam, back in the day, Sketch was the big hotness at VML Y&R, and everybody, couldn't get enough of it. And now, look at us now. We're moved on to Figma. Sketch is just kind of a figment of our imagination, right? But yeah, at Atlassian, we really focus on separating the two, right? So we follow a design thinking process called the Atlassian way. And we follow the classic double diamond, right? In the first half, we are researching, we're figuring out what we need to solve. And then once we know that, we go to the second part of the diamond, and we actually execute and make that. And that is void of our tool set. That's because you just don't know what the right tool at the right time is going to be. And it's much like a carpenter, right? A carpenter shows up to a house build and they bring every tool, but they don't use every single tool every day. And that's kind of the way that we think about it here at Atlassian. The second thing is the whole is greater than the individual parts. So, we don't want to strip individuality, and we don't want teammates. We want teammates to bring their experiences from past projects, right? Like those learnings are super valuable, but we don't want to bring it at the cost of the team, right? And Adam, I know at VML Y&R, you guys are very particular on that when you're actually hiring your engineering teams.
Yeah. And even beyond engineering, the design, delivery teams, QA, everyone goes through Agile and Scrum training. And one of the first phrases they hear as they enter those courses is people over process. So I love this principle just because, if we're holding tools higher than the process, we're contradicting what we're teaching from day one.
Yeah, absolutely. And then our last principle here is, conversate the end-to-end design intent, right? So again, like I said at the beginning, a lot of this is we're going to be hitting it over the head with making sure that you actually have real conversations outside of the tools, outside of the process, because that's what's going to help accelerate that. And as you can see from the illustration here on the right-hand side, if you're following a process like the double diamond process, you don't want to be using the same tool for every single step, right? Like that's just going to force you into bad habits. And so you really want to be flexible with your teams. You really want to talk to the teams about what's the right tool at the right time. So yeah, it's okay to use multiple tools to get the job done, right? You want to make sure that everyone's crystal clear on what were the outcome or the end experiences we're going for.
Yeah. So your question now may be, how does this manifest itself into my own team? And so one phrase that has kind of become adopted within our walls is hygiene. So just like we hope that our team members are taking showers, brushing their teeth, combing their hair, we want our teams themselves to practice good hygiene. So it's a fun team to work with. And so while they can change from team to team, I wanted to share 3 of those principles that we see remain fairly consistent through the process. So the first one of those is to migrate designs to Zeppelin at 80% complete. And what that means is that we really ask the designers and the product owners on the client side to take a look at the designs that they're reviewing. And when they feel that they're about 80% there of achieving their goal, to go ahead and push those into Zeppelin. And then we use integrations with Slack, Team, and Jira to have those feed into a channel that is sitting for the mobile developers. And what that allows us to do is feed that content into the developers and allow them to be engaged in the process. Next in that step, we then ask the developers to take time when it is right. We don't structure this process. We don't set particular time up during the day. We ask, hey, in between breaks of maybe paired programming, their coffee, morning routine, to take a peek into Zeppelin and do a few things potentially. One is t-shirt sizing, just taking a look at the screen and getting an idea of how big a feature or a particular area on that screen may be. This is great because it allows the product owner and the designers to see that estimation. And before we get into more costly group meetings around planning, we can bring that back to the table and ideate on that design a little bit more.
Yeah, and Adam, you're bringing designers into that conversation, right? Into that t-shirt sizing, correct?
Yeah. Yes, correct. Yeah, through basic t-shirt sizing, the planning, grooming, any of those typical ceremonies that developers are used to, we do have the designers sit in to those processes with them. Mainly because we just want to have the designers hear the developers talk about their designs, pick up some of the lingo, understand the complexity that they may be putting in front of the designers, and then just hear the designers out on other alternatives.
Yeah, I love that. It's great to hear that you guys are still doing that. I know that it was a big push when I was there to really get designers included into that. And I know that designers can be quite scared of that process. It's a very technical conversation, but yeah, I agree with it. T-shirt sizing is kind of an ambiguous thing, right? The team has to kind of understand how it works. And in order to have that conversation between, what engineer might think is a medium, but a designer is like, well, we've never designed that interaction before. That actually might be a large. For them to have that conversation, I think is so important and so crucial to delivering that great end experience.
Yeah. And it breaks a barrier too, in the sense that, we often will say one screen doesn't equal one Jira ticket. Just because it's in one screen doesn't mean it's all going to be done in one go. And so we'll use these little comments in Zeppelin to allow the developers to go in and say, hey, I may need this area broken into a few tasks. And so not only is that going to save the project manager some time to kind of be able to telegraph how the developers are seeing that screen, it does allow some education there from the product owner side and the designer side to understand how the developers are seeing their designs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then lastly, is really just experiment with the process. We know that an engaged team is a happy team. The more that you can get your team involved with it and not have the design or the ideation be so precious, and allowing the QA and the developers and the program managers to be involved in that, the more that everyone buys in to the effort. And as I mentioned, we know from team to team that things will change just because it may be the same developer or developers moving across projects. They understand that it may be new designers and they may have to modify that practice as they maneuver through.
Yeah. And I love that you're preaching that, because that actually leads us into our final rule of today, right? And that's if everyone slightly hates it, you've got it right. And hate's a strong word, but I'm trying to drive a point home today. I've worked with so many teams in the past where the design team is just not able to get what they want. And we sit down, we look at the process, and the process is clearly optimized for the engineering team, right? And you go talk to engineering, they're like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I know what to do next. I know exactly what my teammates are doing. And that's where we then have to pull the team together, have the hard conversations and say, look, guys, we all kind of need to meet in the middle, right? So to kind of get into that, if my point here is if it's optimized for one, it's actually optimized for none. Like I said, if your product management team is loving it, then your engineering team and your design teams might not appreciate the tool. Therefore, they might not use it. And now you're starting to lose, continuity between the teams, right? So really, really important to kind of get on a whiteboard, figure out what your process is, and then apply the tool to it. The second point I want to make is, I'm always working with my design teams and I'm telling them to design where the team is working, right? So, design has a tendency to go off and kind of work in silos from time to time, right? And we just know that that's a recipe for disaster, right? So I'm encouraging them, get in the tools that your engineers are, right? You will be able to actually achieve what your desired outcome is for the particular experience. And so you can see here on the right hand side here, we have a classic developer loop here, right? The build, measure, learn cycle, and then selfish plug for last thing here, our suite of awesome products. And I'm not asking a designer to use every single one of these products, right? But you have something like Jira, Confluence, and Jira Service Desk that are crucial to where customers are speaking, where the development team is talking about the experience they're building. And yeah, I know you, Adam, you have a kind of an affinity for Confluence, and a lot of people don't have that, but yeah, it is a great tool to keep the team together.
Yeah, I know it can be a journey to kind of get the design team through Jira and Confluence. But one way we've been able to start kind of seeding that idea is using Confluence. As we, the BAs and PMs, put in those screens that have been approved and are getting ready for development, any of that documentation with the screen, the API calls, any of that, we actually have started encouraging the designers, and they have been getting in there to see what data and how that design that they've built is actually going to be constructed from the APIs. And so, it gives them a little bit more understanding of where the developer's coming, but in a way too, it's getting them into Confluence and getting them into Jira and some of those tools. So they realize that they're just not a tool for developers, that can be an effective communication platform.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, some of the designers I work with, they're like, oh, it slows us down. And I'm like, yeah, but look at the outcome, right? Look at the experience that you guys are delivering. Everyone knows exactly what it should be. And therefore the end result is just so much better, right? So I think making that connection that slowing down a little bit now, it'll actually speed things up later, is a great principle to keep in mind there. As an example, I wanted to kind of, you saw some workflows on some previous slides that Adam was talking over. I want to show and prove to you guys that, Jira is optimized, can be optimized for design, right? So here is an actual workflow in Jira that we use at Atlassian. And yeah, the great thing about this is you can see some of the terms on this page here. Some of the designers out there, you'll be very familiar with some of these, right? And the great thing about this is if you build this workflow, you can actually connect it to another, your engineering team's workflow. And now your tickets, right? Like the actual work you're working on is actually connected. So when someone goes in to read a story, right, they're going to see the engineering tasks, they're going to see the design tasks associated with that. And that kind of transparency is just, it's paramount, right? And again, it's about everybody understanding what the outcome is, right? What the end experience needs to be. Now I want to give a little bit of tough love, back to the engineering groups, right? It's not all about making designers, kind of meet halfway, right? I want to make sure that designers aren't afraid to pull their engineering teams into the early process, right? Into research, into ideation, right? And I know that not every engineer is going to want to do this. They showed up to program, and we want to let them do that. However, I've really seen in my career, the engineers that get involved in the early process, they work so much quicker and they have so much more clairvoyancy at the end of it because they actually know what the end outcome is, right? So I think as you start to pull engineers into that process, yes, they might be a little bit scared or afraid at the beginning of it, but once they start seeing the why of what they're building, they can be so much more efficient, right? And yeah, Adam, I think, we designers, there's always like one or two, we can always use one or two more designers on a project, right? Like I think there's always more design capacity, which means that as designers, we can't be in every conversation. We can't be everywhere, right? So these tools like Confluence, Jira, Zeppelin, Figma, so important because that's what keeps the continuity between the engineers and the design teams.
Yeah. And we're lucky enough on, I think, our mobile practice, with our native developers as a tight-knit team, and same with the design side as well, but we still mix them up and they'll change from team to team. But, just like a good professional sports team, over time, they start to understand where each other is going to be on the court. So, James, a developer, knows what to expect when he's getting assets from Scott or design screens from Scott. And Scott knows how James particularly cares to receive those assets. And we expect that to change from developer to developer, project to project. And you made a good point, John, in that, sometimes you may have a developer that is in that mindset, like, I just want to code, like, give me what I need to do. But don't lose that advantage that you have of the developers that love getting involved in this process and are happy to iterate with the product owner and the design team in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we want to put a nice bow on our talk today and recap the 3 rules of leading design and development teams. Starting off with our first one, right, which is make sure that you separate your process from your tools, right? So processes and tools, they're always evolving, and one tool might go away the next day, and you don't want your process to be completely wrecked because the process was so dependent on the tool. The whole of the team is greater than the individual. Again, we want individual perspective. That's what makes great products. But to show up, to leave your ego at the door is so important when building these experiences, because you're going to have heated conversations. And, the healthiest teams argue, and that's a good thing, right? So keeping that mind that you're doing this for the greater good of the team is super important. And the last thing is make sure that you conversate the end-to-end design intent, right? So, we're designing screens, we're writing code, we're using our tools every day to communicate, but it doesn't beat a face-to-face conversation, right? The more you can talk about the experience that you're going for, the more people can be proactive on the team, and you can actually maybe out achieve what you originally set out to do.
Yeah, and create and practice good hygiene on your team. Like we said, an engaged team is a happy team. Find moments where you can actually involve that design team or the QA team in different parts of their roles to get a little bit more feedback. Establish and maintain habits that work for your team. As we mentioned, it's going to change team from team, even if the same team members are involved, because the client may change and the client may have different needs or react to a process differently. And then self-care is not selfish. We really harp on the fact that if the design team or the development team feels like they're just not getting what they need, or the other team's not listening, sit down and explain, try to meet each other in the middle, and kind of exercise those muscles to be able to figure out what works best for that particular team.
Yep, absolutely. And then our last rule here is just, if everyone slightly hates it, then you got it just right. And so again, if it's optimized for one team, it's probably not optimized for the rest of the teams. Therefore, the other teams aren't using the tools, aren't talking, and have no idea where we're progressing, right? The second thing here is making sure you design where the team is. So don't be afraid to try a new tool if you're a designer, right? Like, yes, it might be a pain in the ass to begin with, but you might get a better result, and you actually might be able to ship something that you actually intended to ship. And then again, designers, don't be afraid to pull your engineering counterparts into conversations up into the research and the ideation phases. Again, Adam and I have seen time and time again, teams that kind of ideate and understand the core problem, the core why of why you're building something. The income is just way better, right? It's actually purposeful, and everyone can contribute and be more proactive in real time. That brings us to the end of our talk. We really appreciate you guys coming and listening to us. If you guys have any comments, feedback, questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to Adam and I on Twitter or email us directly. We would love to continue the conversation.